Welcome to this edition of Weather to Watch. It's the 23rd of April, right in the middle of the week, and it's quiet across the country, but things will change. Another upper-level system will bring heavier rains and more severe weather to the nation's midsection. Welcome to Weather to Watch. It's a Wednesday afternoon. We're in the closing days of April here, last week, and the weather's actually pretty quiet, which is good news. We've had an interesting spring where we've had these oscillations between extreme weather, severe weather, and flooding mostly, and then quiet like we're in now, and then it looks like another low will come ashore here in the next day or so and kind of wreak havoc in the central U.S. once again. Probably not to the same extent, but it is a spring pattern and actually not that unusual for this time of year. Anyway, this is actually a fairly quiet pattern. It features just kind of a hodgepodge of cloudiness here and there across the U.S. Probably the most exciting feature is this swirl in the clouds up here in northern Minnesota up into Canada right in here. That's about it. Otherwise, we see these thunderstorm clusters. A lot of them are driven by the outflow of the other thunderstorm clusters. So, and that's typical when you have weak upper level winds. And here's a look at that. So here's the 500 millibar flow. That swirl in Minnesota is due to this upper level system here. And of course, the winds blow along in these channels like this. And the speed of the wind is proportional to how close these lines are together. So it's kind of a pattern across the central U.S. and the eastern U.S. because zonal flow, so it means it's mostly going from west to east. There's a little disturbance there in Oregon and Northern California too. So, and one leaving in New England. But generally speaking, it's quiet and appreciated, I think, by most after going through a lot of interesting weather. So, if we look at this from a larger perspective, this is a model output, but it's pretty close to what's going on. There's that disturbance there in Minnesota, the one in New England, that weak one in Oregon, and we're looking out here to see a combination of these two systems right here that's going to come down, dive in, and then eject into the southwestern U.S. Coming this weekend. So we've got days left of relatively quiet weather before that happens. We'll take a look in the central U.S. here, and you can see it's an interesting visible satellite, actually. We see these high cirrus clouds with a fan pattern, very fascinating to watch, spreading over parts of Missouri. Thunderstorm clusters firing in Kansas, backfiring, actually. If you notice, they start firing and then they kind of go back toward the northwest. See, these initially form here, and then they form back here. So, interesting pattern. There's a front in that area, and we'll show you on the surface map. There's a cold front connected to a low at the surface, which is not real deep, but connected to that upper level system. High pressure nosing its way into North Dakota, and the front kind of slicing from Eau Claire down to Omaha, into around the Springfield, Colorado area with a warm front through Missouri. So the thunderstorms that I just showed you are forming along the triple point right there. And the real severe weather, and I'll highlight that here in a minute, is actually in Texas, not along the fronts, and that sometimes happens as well. Here's a look at station plots here. This probably would have been valid at 4 o'clock, and I show these to you just to kind of show you it's some of the gustier winds at the surface in the U.S. with gusts in the lower 20-mile-per-hour range there through northern Wisconsin. Temperatures in Illinois are comfortably up in the upper 70s or mid-70s. A little rain being reported there in Kenosha. And then the wind shifts. You can see it's generally coming out of the northeast and then out of the northwest here. So, and a lot of these areas of wind are being affected by the thunderstorms themselves. And you can also see a moisture gradient here where dew points are in the 50s. That's that kind of bluish gray to the bottom left of the station plot. And then they drop all the way down into the low 30s back here in South Dakota. Severe weather hasn't completely gone away. The upper level winds are just weak enough to not really get a lot of supercells developed. For that, you need the difference in wind from the surface up to about 3 miles in the atmosphere to be at least 30 miles per hour, or actually about 35 to 40 miles per hour. And that is not really there, but there are local little mechanisms going on that support at least level 2 severe risks out here in the panhandle of Texas primarily. And you already saw along the frontal zone here, we had those thunderstorms firing right there. So that's for the remainder of today. And then it says go into Thursday. It's really just kind of a level 1 risk broadly from Denver sweeping back through Oklahoma and down through the dry line area of West Texas. And then we have to skip to Friday here. And again, kind of weak forcing, nothing real organized to support a broad area of severe weather. So anywhere in basically almost all of Oklahoma and those same areas of Texas could see some severe storms on Friday. Now, over the weekend, things are going to organize, and then I'm going to make a comment about this too. This is the forecast for severe weather on Monday, but I think there's a strong contender for having a severe weather parameter issue tomorrow morning when they update these for this area right here for Sunday. Well, there was some concern that atmosphere might be capped, and it indeed may be, but I saw some model evidence today that it may not be as bad and that the upper level winds are going to get faster out there quicker, which would help to break and alleviate that a little bit, I think. But anyway, that's Sunday. But Monday, broad brush from Oklahoma City all the way up to Minneapolis, and they don't do the 5 categories this far out. They just give you percentages, 15 or 30. So that's, I think, something worth watching because the storm system generating it does look pretty potent. As a matter of fact, this kind of shifts on Tuesday to include southern Michigan, Chicago, down to St. Louis. Where I live here in Springfield, all the way down to Dallas is a 30% risk. And again, it's just a reflection of that weather system moving off to the east a little bit more. The supercell composite, as compiled by NIU, this is really just telling you where severe weather is possible based on the development of supercells and their ranges. So this one goes from April 23rd here today to April 29th, and it kind of backs up what I was just talking about. And then if we go forward, all the dates in the upper right-hand corner are wrong, by the way. I never changed them. Sorry. Look down here. This is April 30th through May 6th. It goes more down into Texas, but a little arm of that extends up into Kansas and even into Iowa, maybe. And then we're back again for the period May 7th. This is 3 weeks out through May 13th. A very high concentration and probability of supercells developing in Oklahoma southward to the Gulf, Arkansas, and this is an interesting pattern. And by the way, following the climatology of severe weather really to a T, this is exactly the same part of the country that should see an increase in supercells and severe storms come May. Here's some total precipitation forecast, and this is more or less centered on Kansas, Oklahoma, Arkansas, and Missouri. They just got through with that extreme rain of late last week and into the early part of the weekend. So the rivers are draining, and enough time, I think, to get those down a little bit before more hits. Now, this is just through Friday with some shadow, shower, and thunderstorm chances, all pretty much staying below 2 inches for the most part. But if I extend that for the next 7 days, then it's a different painted picture here. Now we're talking about 3 to 4 inch totals again, in almost the exact same area that received the most, which was right in here. So that is a little bit concerning, I think. It is springtime. It does rain a lot, but fortunately the gap between the last rain and this is a little over a week before it really sets in. So some good news there. Let's take a look at that all-telling 500 millibar flow starting with today. And you can see that disturbance in Minnesota, northern Minnesota, and just kind of that broad flow into Texas that's kind of supporting severe weather in pockets. But then you start to see toward the end here, now we're looking at Thursday evening, now we're looking at Friday morning. Notice that our stronger winds, the darker purples and the lighter purples starting to make inroads into California and almost the Four Corners region. So this low is kind of taking its time. It's kind of swirling around, not really advancing very far, which always makes me nervous because you never know how these are going to eject. But this is the weather map about noon on Saturday. Still, broadly not really in the plains yet. In fact, we have a nice ridge of high pressure right here. So this is going to be a really warm pattern for everybody underneath there. And these winds are increasing out of the southwest out there. And then we start going more into, this is Sunday, right about noon or 1 o'clock. And this is why I say I think that this area here might get some severe weather because the wind profiles are actually speeding up since the last time I looked at that. So that depth that I was talking about, the shear, that's actually improving there. And then if you're wondering about the severe weather outlook, so this is Monday around noon or 1 o'clock, strong maximum of jet stream winds there, and then just kind of a broader flow here. So it looks like the strong forcing for severe weather will certainly be in the northern plains, but I think anything basically, well, in that outlined area, which was something like that, is up up for severe weather, and that's Monday. And then on Tuesday, if we go through here, this is Tuesday about 1 o'clock in the afternoon. This is actually getting a little fuzzier in terms of severe weather. And again, the more in time you go out on these models, the less accurate they are. So again, when you have these cutoff lows, sometimes how they're going to eject and how they're going to interact with other disturbances is not always clear, especially many days out into the future. Here's the 6 to 10 day temperature outlook, and it looks pretty warm in much of the country, except for that low pressure center in the upper atmosphere is going to be come this weekend and early next week. So rainy and kind of below normal there from Wyoming down to Mexico. But much of the central and eastern U.S. is forecast to be very mild and very wet, as you saw, with a high probability of above normal precipitation in that exact area where I showed you that precipitation forecast on the high side. And as far as May is concerned, the last charts we'll look at here, the May outlook for temperature is out. The Northeast and the Midwest, the Great Lakes, about normal, but a little toasty perhaps in Arizona and New Mexico. And still an arc of rain from Arkansas to the nation's capital. Just in general in May, so we're kind of shifting it back to where it was back in early April and in March. And the last couple of rains have been focused on, and will be focused there, and then the ones back earlier were focused more in here. Well, now it looks like we're back into that pattern again. So just be advised that rivers will be on the rise across the central and eastern U.S. probably for about the next 4 to 6 weeks in various forms. Thanks for watching this edition of Weather to Watch. It comes out every other day, or as the weather necessitates. Please remember to share this with your friends, subscribe to the channel, or at the very least, like what you just watched. Thanks.